You never know. All right.
Excuse me.
Do you want to keep that in?
Yeah, probably. Okay. We'll keep that in.
Wow. Well, what a way to open, guys.
Unscripted. That's the unscripted, just the laughs that you get here.
This is semi-unscripted, but look, there's a very long and detailed article that has been released from Kotaku. We're going to go point by point as much of the important information. It's like a 15-minute read or something.
It's about Skull and Bones.
Okay, it's about Skull and Bones. There's a lot to it. I actually played it in E3, either 2017 or 2018 or whatever. So many games that we played at E3, but we did play it. We haven't heard anything really since. There's been a very lengthy, well-researched article now come out, talk about the development hell this thing has been in. Let's get into it after the drop. All this and more. Do you have another burp?
I don't. I wish I did.
Here we go. Alright, so Alec, you haven't actually got a chance. A lot of people haven't got a chance to play this yet.
Most people haven't.
I mean, no one really has.
Most people don't go to E3.
Listen, we played like 30 games there, 40 games at any given time. Oh, a lot of games. I cannot remember my experience with this. I'm just going to be real with you here. Like, I can't really remember what it was like, but, you know, it has been now years since then. It has been reworked, reimagined. You know, new people have taken over in terms of creative director, and it's just been falling apart every single year, it seems. But apparently it's going to be coming out in 2023. Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, so for the uninitiated, Skull and Bones is essentially a standalone pirate game. Came off the success of Black Flag.
Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Yeah. So Black Flag was very much praised for its naval combat and, you know, that whole pirate kind of aesthetic, the shanties, how it felt to be on the water. It was definitely the celebrated portion of that game for me.
Yeah,
one of the last Assassin's Creed I actually played.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the transitional phase that a lot of people were experiencing with Assassin's Creed. Of course, since then we've seen Valhalla and Odyssey and those kind of open world stuff. But you know, Black Flag for a lot of people, even Conrad, our brother that doesn't play games, loved it.
He plays Tony Hawk and Assassin's Creed Black
Flag. And Counter-Strike. That's pretty much it.
But yeah, so the important point about this is that the specific naval combat and just the entire pirate on the water side of the game, how it felt, how it handled mechanically, was developed by Ubisoft Singapore's office.
Now, it's important to mention that pretty much from the get-go, there was no clear vision from this game.
And apparently there still isn't.
There still isn't even. And look, there is a quote here that talk about, you know, the article talks about the development of the game, but even now, a former developer says a lot of stuff still doesn't make sense. Just polishing it at this point would be a waste of time. It seems like even at this very moment, there's still a lot of like, what does this game even look like?
And it's important to remember that this game started development in 2013. So we're talking about 8 years later. We still don't have things making sense. We still don't have an idea of what we're kind of doing with this project.
I think that we also should touch on the fact that, you know, this has been made by Singapore Ubisoft Singapore. In the article, it talks about that, you know, this is not a new, but it hasn't actually done a lot of blockbuster titles.
Well, they haven't done their own game.
Yes.
They're a support studio.
So they've actually got a lot of subsidies, a lot of funding by the Singapore government, and part of the actual agreement was two things. One of them was that they had to employ developers from Singapore, and the second one was that they needed to make IP that was going to be released in the Singapore region.
And importantly, it needs to be a new IP.
It
needs to be new projects.
New IP.
And so, yeah, the Singapore government basically gave Ubisoft a lot of cash in subsidies for them to, you know, work out of this studio.
Yeah.
In order for Ubisoft to, you know, hold up their end of the bargain. And they have to see it through. This game, something needs to come out of this studio for those agreements to essentially hold water.
Which is interesting. Hold water, very nice. Which I
Pirate
think...
pun.
Nice. What I think is interesting, the main thing that I want to at least touch on in this particular part is, maybe this is going to be a really good lesson for developers in the future and publishers in the future, that it's all well and good to partner up with governments and create agreements to bring something to create a product in the gaming space, but now you are left in a position where you absolutely have to finish Skull and Bones when you are locked in. Creative things sometimes don't work out, And when you have signed these agreements and kind of employed all these people in Singapore, I think the initial idea is really good, and it's a really positive thing to feel like the government and a company can partner up, give employment to Singapore developers, and also create IP that will be new IP under the Singapore banner. But it's obviously now, I think, a cautionary tale, because it means that you need to finish something that in a lot of ways is so unbelievably broken.
And just quickly on that point, a lot of the development woes are a resultant of the fact that it doesn't matter where this office is, it just happens to be in Singapore, but it's very much Ubisoft in Paris pulling the strings.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we basically find ourselves in the position and where Skull and Bones 8 years later is still in turmoil, and in the last 5 years has gone through 3 or 4 different iterations on what the game is actually going to be.
What's also important to mention is there's been at least 3 creative directors at the helm of this project, and with that, of course, they've all tried to steer this in a particular direction. There's also been drastic changes how they actually want to position and create this game. It's gone originally from being set in the Caribbean Ocean to then in the Indian Ocean, and then it went to almost like a Sid Meier's Pirates style game, where they were going to take a lot of inspiration from that particular line of games. And then lastly, they also looked at making a floating city called Libertalia, a cathedral on water. But then, of course, they went back for 2017 and the 2018 reveal back to predominantly being only on the ship and doing kind of PvP combat against each other, and they ditched that idea. On top of that, now they've come back apparently and said, no, they do want people to land on islands and be able to explore. And I'm guessing that's because they've seen the success of Sea of Thieves, and they've thought, oh, we need to implement that too. So in that regard, it has been, like, in terms of the imagination of this and the vision of this, it's just been all over the place for the last 8 years or so.
Yeah, so kind of in short, they don't even know where the game is set at the moment. Or maybe they do now, but I mean, as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, they didn't know the setting. And they also didn't know what the actual game was going to be. So the developers that actually sort of spilled the beans under the condition of anonymity. that spoke on the condition of anonymity.
Yep.
They basically likened it very much to Anthem. And I was going to sort of say in my point, this reminds me of Anthem, where Soderlund, basically he played a demo of Anthem and he felt the flying, and he's like, this flying has to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You're onto something with this flying, and they kind of built the game around that one really good mechanic. And it feels very similar, where Sea of Thieves, they smashed it out of the park. Sorry, not Sea of Thieves, Skull and Bones. They smashed it out of the park with the naval component of Black Flag. They've got this really good mechanic. They just don't know how to build a game around it. And that's ultimately the issue here.
Yeah, I think, look, another quote that one of the developers said is, if Skull and Bones was at a competitor, it would have been killed 10 times already. And I think that's really interesting. It just gives us a window of how much turmoil there actually has been. I think you're right in saying Anthem is a perfect example. With Jason Schreier's investigative reporting, he also brought out, a year ago or so. Yeah, that this was very similar. The vision was not there. It didn't know where it was actually going. And the result was that we got a very unfinished and broken game. And of course, it didn't review well. Anthem Next didn't work either. I wonder if this is going on the same path. Now, they've also said that this is going to come out in 2023, originally pushed back from 2018 to 2019 to 2019 to 2020 to 2022. Now it's also been pushed back to 2023. So look, there's a lot of information in the article. We wanted to try and find the major points. I'm sure we've missed some other major stuff too. We're going to have the link in the article. But, like, what does this say to you? Because for me, this really says that, I think so many developers must look at this stuff and it must be a cautionary tale. But having said that, with Anthem, for instance, which happened years ago too, it just seems like when other games fall into such disarray, we continuously see more and more other studios and developers also find themselves in this same situation. Like, what would you put it down to?
Well,
I mean, it's not like I can.
I've been undercover in Singapore. I've just returned, and I'm going to give you the scoop on what things are happening.
What I mean is, like, you know, we've seen this time and time again. Like, if you were to find a common thread, what would you say? I think the common thread is always upper management does not have a clear, firm understanding of what they need to do. You know, we saw with Halo Infinite, we've seen creative directors leave also. The game hasn't come out yet, but it's been pushed back several times, and it didn't launch with the actual console. We hope it's going to be good, but it seems like it's also falling in line with that. Similar creative vision is uncertain, and the higher-ups of those particular companies are leaving, just like they did with Anthem.
Yeah, look, I think, and the article does go on to say, you know, one of the big issues is that it's as with so many of Ubisoft's games, they're these real collaborative efforts. And there are two particular teams, one that's really sort of regimented, very much top-down management system where it trickles down from the top and is dispersed to the drones, and they just do what the creative vision of the uppers of the higher ups. They just sort of iterate on that and work on that. There's another team that works a bit more horizontally, and so their two management approaches are just clashing all the time because they don't really know who to follow. They don't know what work style to be kind of, you know, going by. And it really just comes down to, it seems, and as is reported, a really bad case of just mismanagement on every level. I mean, if you guys remember back to the 2012, 2013 period, Black Flag was one of those
turning generational things.
Exactly. It was on the 360 and PS3, and it was on the PS4 and Xbox One. So, you know, that game was wrapping up. It looked how it looked. Skull and Bones was just starting. So they were working with the old assets of Black Flag and were hoping just to kind of flip them and make a game quite quickly. But it's just dragged on. They had no vision at the start, they had no leadership, and they had no direction. That all the assets that they were working with at that point in time began to look outdated. So not only did they not have a game to use the Black Flag ideas in, but they actually no longer had the core assets that they were going to reuse. So they needed to go back to the drawing board, even at the most elemental level.
Yep, smaller things before we wrap up, really. It's apparently cost them already $120 million. The team went from 100 people to 400 people while they try and figure this whole thing out. Skull and Bones apparently now has passed into the alpha phase, so maybe we're going to start seeing some hands-on YouTubers and, you know, media outlets be able to start playing this game. Again, I played it a couple of years ago, can't really remember what it was like, but I'll be really interested to see what this is going to be. I think if a game takes this long to come out, it really shows that there's of course been a lot of red flags along the way. But on top of that, when you couple this together with having to deliver a product because you have contractual agreements with Singapore, it's a melting pot, I think, for a forced creative product. And I wonder what this is going to be like when it comes out.
That's a really good point, because a lot of the developers in that quoted or that were spoken with, they say that everyone is just so burnt out. I mean, like when you're working, you know, when I'm working, certainly on a project that just doesn't go anywhere, you feel like, well, what's the point? And because everything is completely wiped, all this work that they put into for 3, 4, 5, 6 months just gets thrown off the table, and they say rebuild it. You know, the issue is that a lot of the effort that would go into a product like this is half what it should be, or 3/4, or not even. Because a lot of the sentiment with the development teams is that everything's going to be thrown in the bin anyway. So why are we going to give all of ourselves into this project when what we're working on is probably going to go in the trash? And, you know, Ubisoft in Paris are going to just completely rewrite this for us. So look, I think we can go back through the times in the industry where projects have taken these really long, protracted development cycles. Look at Duke Nukem Forever, a garbage. You know, or look at Aliens Colonial Marines, another example. Like, whenever something is stretched over such a long period of time and is mismanaged, very rarely does anything good come from it.
Same with Fallout 76 in terms of, like, there was a lack of creative vision, there was a misunderstanding. It was all just a bit of a mess, the development, and it wasn't until later Todd Howard did come out and say that he knew that the actual product being launched was subpar. And I think You know, I think this maybe falls into the camp when this comes out. We don't know. But all we can do is look at previous titles, previous development cycles, and see what other games have come about. This just seems like it's falling in the same line. We're going to leave the link in the description. Have a look at it, guys.
It's a long read, but it's a good
long read. Definitely worth it. We tried to just give you the major points today, so you wouldn't have to read it if you didn't want to. But
it might also take you 8 years to read the article.
It's that long. But anyway, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you guys next time. Layman out.
Way up she rises, way up she rises, way up she rises, early in the morning. What will we do with the drunken sailor? What will we do with the drunken sailor? What